Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. In this video, I want to talk with you about burnout. Not a fun topic, but we're 1 year into the pandemic as I'm recording this, and I think a lot of people are fed up, maybe except for the super introverts who are like, thank God I don't have to go anywhere. But you know, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of fear, that is used by governments to get you to do what they think they need you to do. And so when there is chronic fear, you are at risk for burning out. But the problem with chronic fear is that it builds up slowly and you don't necessarily notice. And chronic fear turns into chronic stress, which can turn into a chronic adrenaline boost for as long as your endocrine system can produce that. And so often what happens is when you get more stressed, you don't necessarily feel worse. You may feel more excited, you may have more trouble sleeping, you might be feeling a little bit tired but also wired. But usually when it's getting worse, you don't realize it's getting worse yet. So I want to talk about this problem of burnout and what it really is and what it's not. And I could talk about this for hours, and I actually have, because I think it's such an important topic right now. So I made a whole series of audios inside the Happy Sensitive library about some of the very common, very key misunderstandings about burnout that can push you into burnout further. But in this video, I want to do a bit of an intro, because I know that for me, a little over 10 years ago, I thought that people who burned out were having a midlife crisis, or they were just, weak. Because that was the common idea out there, that if you burn out, you're weak somehow, you're not trying hard enough. But actually, it's the exact opposite. When you burn out, you're someone who keeps trying and keeps working really hard against all the odds. And you're probably used to doing that, and you probably don't realize how hard you're working. And so people who are at risk of burning out are actually people who are very capable, people who take a lot of responsibility often. And I want to talk about how this relates to high sensitivity in this video. So high sensitivity, very simply put, is you have a nervous system that picks up on more information. So you hear more, you see more, you feel more, and because of that, you pick up on more data about the environment. And what that does, or what that can do, is it can put you in a position where you notice things that other people don't notice. Now, if you couple this with also being someone who is a deep processor, which is also part of high sensitivity, meaning that it doesn't mean that you're obsessing or mulling over things or that you can't let go. I think sometimes deep processing is taken to mean by people like, oh, I obsess about something and I can't let it go, so I'm a deep processor. Like, no, deep processing means that you really look at something from multiple angles, you take your time, you pause and reflect, you don't jump to conclusions, you really, you don't just mull over the same thoughts over and over, you really look at it from different sides and you take your time to make up your mind about something. And when you have a lot of information coming in, a lot of sensory input coming in, and you have this tendency to process it deeply, really think about it, really take it on board, really look at multiple angles. And you tend to be more empathic, meaning you care about what happens to people, right? This is another thing that gets really confused. People think that when they care about what other people think about them, that's empathy, right? I see this so much right now where it's like, I care a lot about what everybody thinks about me. That's not empathy, right? So empathy is about, you care about what happens to people. You care about how they're doing. That has nothing to do with what they think about you or how they feel about you or whether they like you or not. But let's go back. So you have high sensitivity, meaning you pick up a lot of stimulation from the environment. You have this deep processing, meaning you really take this information on board. And then if you add on empathy and really caring about what happens to the people around you and being often the first to spot things, that are off. Highly sensitive people are sometimes compared to being the canary in the mine. You notice things before other people do. So what this translates into is that if you're in a work environment or a situation where you see things are going wrong, you notice things are going wrong, you're noticing people are getting stressed, you're noticing people are getting upset, you're noticing that things aren't working, you're noticing that, like people have kind of had it, and other people around you are like, no, it's not so bad, it's fine, it's not a problem, because they don't see those signals. And you combine that with empathy, and you combine that with being somebody who takes responsibility and wants to help, you can end up being the person who always feels responsible for making sure things don't go wrong and overworking yourself. And people might say you just have to let go, you just have to move on, you just have to let other people do their job. But if you are the only one who sees something, and you know that over time other people will start to see it too, but it's going to take a while, then letting go isn't just like, oh, somebody else will step in. Letting go means nobody's going to do this. Nobody's going to look out for this problem. Nobody's going to take care of it. So in this way, highly sensitive people who are high in empathy and take a lot of responsibility are at higher risk of burning out, because you're always in a position where you're seeing what is potentially going wrong that other people don't see. And you also know that if you don't take responsibility for it, if you don't try to do something about it, nobody else will, at least not for a while. So this is a really difficult conundrum to be in. And somebody simply telling you to let go and let other people do their thing is not necessarily going to cover that, because you're like, but nobody else sees the problem. Nobody else notices this. I'm noticing it. It's obvious to me, but other people are not seeing it. So if you're that person, you can get into the habit of always working hard, always anticipating, always kind of being ahead of the curve of, oh, we need to look into this. We need to be careful about this. We need to, take this on board. And so you're always working hard, and you're not getting the accolades. You're not getting the congratulations. You're not getting the kind of appreciation for that, because other people don't even see the problem that you're solving, because they haven't gotten to the point where they can see it yet. They're not noticing it, right? So in this way, being highly sensitive can increase your risk of burning out. And it's not because you're weak, and it's not because you're not trying hard enough, and it's not necessarily because you're having a midlife crisis or you don't know who you are. It can just be that you've been running too hard, you've been working too hard, too long, and you've gotten too used to it, so used to it that you don't even notice how hard you're working. It's just you're normal. And hard working doesn't always show up as physically working hard. It doesn't always mean you're dragging lumber around. It doesn't mean, you're like chopping wood and like hammering things into place. It's not always visible. And there's been, more and more, we've been seeing discussions on invisible labor that women often do, the thinking about things, the anticipating, the reminding people, all that stuff that takes a lot of brain space and a lot of energy and focus, but you don't necessarily see. You don't get the results, right? If you're reminding someone to do something. Okay, and we're back. So my battery died, and then I tried to continue this recording on a different camera, and I thought I was recording, but then I wasn't. It's been a whole thing, and now I'm trying not to bleed on myself. It's very fun here right now. So okay, so I was talking with you guys about how there's all this invisible labor, and there's been more talk about that recently, and I'm sure you can find all kinds of articles on it, and it's helpful to read. Being highly sensitive, and especially if you're also kind of sensitive to energy and you sense things on that level, is a whole new level of invisible labor, invisible taking responsibility, noticing invisible elephants in the room that other people don't necessarily notice yet because they're not as attuned to those particular issues. And so you can end up completely overloading yourself with responsibility when you are that kind of person. Now, the reason I think it's really important to talk about this is because there are so many misconceptions about what a burnout is, what leads to a burnout, and what is required to get out of it. A lot of people think that if you burn out, that you're weak, right? or you just need a break and you just need to go on holiday, and then you'll be better when you come back. But a bit of burnout is an accumulation of habits that have been exhausting you, usually very slowly, right? So if you only spend 5% more energy than you have per day, you're going to end up very, very exhausted and depleted. But 5% might not be noticeable. Or maybe it's 0.5% more than you actually have to give, that you're giving. And so you slowly deplete over time, but you get used to it. You get used to how it feels. You get used to how to manage. And so burnout is not as obvious as it seems. Like, to other people, it can seem like maybe you're just suddenly depressed, and it's easy to write it off as something that, oh, that will never happen to me, or I'm not that kind of person, or I would never give up, or I would never do that or this. But really, burnout sneaks up on you, because it's the habits that create burnout are also the habits that people will congratulate you on, that you don't give up, and that you're a hard worker, and that you take responsibility. So a lot of these qualities that are good, when taken through the extreme, can actually lead to burnout. So because this is such an important topic, and because I could talk about this all day, and I'm not going to do that on YouTube, I made a audio series on burnout, the things that I learned, the things that I think most people do not understand. If you are starting to go into burnout, or you're worried that you might, this is really helpful to listen to, because it kind of gives you those turnaround insights that I learned the hard way, like the really, really hard way. But I think if you understand that when you're not burned out yet, it can really help you to start turning things around. And if you're already burned out, then you'll find like a different explanation of what you're going through, a different understanding of what's happening, because a lot of people really don't understand it. And a lot of people are very judgmental of people who've burned out. And by the way, when I say burned out, I mean, you're exhausted, you have no energy, but this can show up in many, many ways. And I would say that things like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, ME, adrenal fatigue, thyroid disorders, they all fall under this umbrella, because all of those conditions are things that happen to people when they're in some way exhausted, and then their body starts, getting issues. And a lot of these labels are kind of end of the road labels. It's the kind of label you get when nobody really knows what's going on with you, but obviously you're not doing well, you're tired, you're in pain, you're struggling, there's something chronic going on. So I find it really helpful to look at a lot of these vague chronic health issues that have to do with tiredness and pain as some kind of your body has been overworked for too long disorder, for a few different reasons. One is that when you don't know what something is and there is no clear cure, because often there isn't with these problems, your best bet is to get your body out of stress mode. Because very simply put, your body has two modes: healing and resting mode, and stress and productivity and running away from danger mode. So if you are in danger mode, your body is not in healing mode. Your body cannot heal. When you're in healing mode, though, there's a lot that your body can do for you. So it's really any kind of chronic problem that you have that doesn't seem to be going away, and there doesn't seem to be a clear issue. Because I had a whole bunch of those. At some point I decided, I'm going to look at that as just a stress problem. It's not just a stress problem, but I'm going to do what I can to get my body into a relaxed healing state so that my body can take care of the problem, whatever it is. And so there's an element to our health that bodies are complicated, like diseases are complicated, but there's an element to our health that we can take charge of, and that is how much pressure we put on ourselves, how much stress we put on ourselves. And, right now we're living in a situation where the whole world is stressed out. People are encouraging you to be afraid. People are telling you should be afraid because it helps government to implement actions to combat corona, combat COVID-19. And the toll that it takes on your body which is, I think this is very weird. This seems to be almost like an afterthought. Like, oh, we just need to get people in line and you know, do all these things, and we need to amp up the fear, and we need to let people know how serious this is. Never mind that we've all been in this for a year now, and we've all been exhausted and tired because of it. Never mind the toll that takes on your mental health and your physical health. And that is something that, you know, ultimately nobody's going to do this for you. Nobody's going to take charge of that, but it's really important to do that. Now, I'm sharing this because my version of burning out was really, really dramatic. 2009, I was 29 years old. I had a job that I loved. It was a stressful job, but it's a job that I loved. And I slowly started to get all kinds of exhaustion issues, concentration issues. I started to develop migraines. And then at one point, I just collapsed. Very politely, very calmly, but I just couldn't do things anymore. And I couldn't concentrate. I could barely read. And nobody could really explain to me what was happening to me. Nobody really understood what I needed or how I needed to go about things. And because I had been, without realizing, pushing myself for so long, by the time I collapsed, I was completely exhausted. And it took me many, many years, not weeks, not months, years to get my energy back up. And I don't think I'm the exception. I don't think that's just because of my, you know, weird way of being or something. I really think that's because I was doing all the right things. I was the kind of, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of person. And I was so good at doing that I just kept pushing beyond where a lot of people would have just given up or let go. I just kept on going. I was so focused and motivated. And, you know, a lot of clients that I work with have developed ways to keep going and to keep pushing, have come from families where they were the ones who saw the elephants in the room and their parents did not. And maybe the parents were occupied with all kinds of problems. Maybe they were emotionally absent. Emotionally absent means that someone is physically present, but their mind is somewhere else. They're not paying attention. They're not really hearing you. They're not really seeing you. They're not really seeing what's going on. And as a kid, that is really terrifying because you feel all alone. You know that your parent is not paying attention to what's going on. And when you have grown up in a situation like that, you end up, if you fit what I've, you know, talked about previously in this video, you end up taking all the responsibility for all the elephants in the room in your family. And you take that habit with you throughout your life. Everywhere you go, everywhere there are elephants in the room that, you know, you take responsibility for that other people ignore. And so you're always piling this work on top of yourself. And it just becomes a way of being and you don't know any better. And these kinds of habits are not, to other people, they may seem like, oh, you're just being too serious or you just have to loosen up a little. But these things go deep. Many of my clients have been in situations as a kid where if they didn't do something as a kid, if they didn't intervene, it could have ended really badly, as in somebody could have died. Okay, it's not like, well, if they hadn't done something, then a plate would have broken. No, this is something really horrible would have happened. And so when that is your conditioning, when that's what you grew up with, when you know, I am needed, I need to do something, otherwise this is all going to fall apart. You're not going to just let go. You're not going to just relax, even when you are very overburdened. And this is where burnout is a real risk, because you lose sight of your own limits. You lose sight of your own limitations. You lose sight of what you need because you get too focused on the things out there that need to get done. And so burnout ultimately requires that you learn to do the opposite, that you learn to let go, you need to learn to let things happen. But that can be dramatic. When you're used to being the one who's keeping all the plates spinning, and you're like, okay, I've got 10 plates that are spinning in the air and I can only do 5. When you let those 5 go, there's not necessarily going to be someone who can step in and take them from you. So you're going to have to let them break and fall. And like I said, that can be really intense, and that can bring up really, really intense fears that are valid. And yet, you're up against this limitation of what you can do and what you can take care of and who you can look after and what you can be responsible for. So sometimes burnout is the only way to be forced to learn this balance. But I think for many of us, it is possible to learn it earlier when you better understand what the dynamics are that lead to burnout and what needs to be done to turn that around. Because it's not just a matter of you just have to be stronger. It's not weak people that burn out. It's not just depression. There's something else going on. It's much bigger than that. And it's hard to see what it is because you're like the fish in the water. You don't understand the water. You're just always swimming in it. And that's a lot of what contributes to burnout. It's this water that you're always swimming in, and you don't realize what it is. So what I've done in the library, in the Happy Sensitive Library, is I've made a series for you on lessons I learned from burnout that can help you when you are burned out, but also if you're moving in that direction, to better understand what's happening and what needs to happen to turn it around. Burnout is not a simple thing that you just take a holiday from and get better. It's not a matter of just taking a magnesium supplement. These are lifelong habits that have pushed you in a certain direction, and it's your body saying something has got to change. I wanted to do this video now because I think there are so many people right now struggling with burnout, so many people telling themselves, just hang in there a few more months, just keep on going, just keep on pushing. And that is a really, really dangerous place to be, because ultimately, if you are healthy, you can start over. Whatever it is, you can begin again. But when your health fails, when you can barely get up in the morning, when it takes you 2 hours to get dressed, like it did for me when I burned out, when a 5-minute phone call is completely exhausting, when you can only read 1 page before you have to close the book, you're going to be really stuck, right? And so this is something that we don't naturally, it's not something I considered. Before I burned out, I never thought, oh, I have to be careful that I don't push myself too far and that I completely collapse and that it'll take me years to get back on my feet again. I never considered that. Especially when you're young, you're not taught to take that into account. But it is a real risk, and it has nothing to do with your age, has nothing to do with how strong you are. In fact, if you're strong, capable, and responsible, you are probably going to burn out more quickly than other people will. And that would be a shame, and that just, it makes life more complicated. So my hope is that with this audio series that I created, I can spare a few people the pain of going through a full-on, intense, years of your life kind of burnout and start turning around more quickly, and also find some understanding for something that a lot of people do not understand, because it's something that you can't really understand if you haven't gone through it. It's very easy to judge. It's very easy to say that would never happen to me. But the kind of people it doesn't happen to are typically the people who are just like, they give up very quickly. They're like, oh, I can't, I don't want to, it's too much work, whatever. And they just opt out, right? Those people typically don't burn out because they have those habits of letting go that you, as someone who strives and endures and puts up with and tries harder and continues and keeps, you keep trying to think positive and keep trying harder. That's the opposite. That's the opposite of giving up and letting go and being like, whatever, right? So ultimately, you need both. You need the ability to let go. You need the ability to say, whatever. You need the ability to just step back. And you need the ability to strive and push and try harder. But it's only when you have both of these abilities, when you've built both of those muscles, then you can strive in a healthy way. But if you've only learned to striving, if you've only learned to pushing, if you've only learned to try harder, and you don't realize how you're depleting yourself more and more every day, then the striving and the working hard becomes unsafe, because you basically have no breaks. You don't know what breaking feels like. You're not willing to take the risk of, what would happen if I stop? It feels too scary. It feels unsafe. And like I said, there are real reasons why it would have been unsafe once upon a time. But, as an adult now, you have different options. So my hope for conversations about burnout is that they get taken out of the "you're just depressed" storyline, because there's a lot of that. Oh, like you just failed, you're just not motivated enough, you're not enthusiastic enough, like you're not enough. Whereas actually people who burn out tend to be very, very much enough, and try and work too hard, and somebody needs to tell them it's okay to stop. It's okay to step back. It's okay to slow down. And here is why what you're doing is going to burn you out and is not sustainable, and it's not what a healthy life or happy life looks like, and it's just not going to work, and it's time to learn a different way. All right, I hope this was helpful for you. I've got links for the Happy Sensitive Library below this video. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.